I firmly believe that Frodo Baggins of the Shire is one of the most undervalued and undercredited heroes in not just fantasy, but in discussion of storytelling entirely. I couldn't count on Smaug's teeth the amount of times that I've heard a Lord of the Rings fan turn around and say, "Dude, Frodo didn't even do anything. It was all Sam. Frodo just laid around like a peanut." And you know what? I don't even blame people for thinking this. If you give me just a bit of your time, I would like to try and explain the tragedy of Frodo's character resonance. Big spoilers ahead, obviously. Through a mix of cinematic neglect and audience misunderstanding, too few people know why Frodo's sacrifice was much more heartbreaking than you think.
But there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting.
What's shakin'? My name's Cam, welcome back to another video. I make weekly videos on fantasy and horror books, reviews, deep dives, video essays, the whole bundle. If that's your kind of thing, I would love it if you stuck around. On that note, I feel like I should probably give a disclaimer before I continue. Today I will be talking about Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings, but exclusively the movie version. While the films are obviously based on and intrinsically linked with Tolkien's written series, I also believe that they are almost an entirely different and separate experience as well. There was a lot that was added, omitted, and drastically changed, both good and bad. And don't get me wrong, this isn't some kind of elitist, "if you haven't read the books, then you aren't a true fan." It's nothing like that. I can confidently say that in my opinion, Lord of the Rings is the best cinematic trilogy of all time. The storytelling, the cinematography, and the cultural impact these movies had was nothing short of a phenomenon. The more you learn about Lord of the Rings and the making of, the more impressive it gets. I mean, have you seen all of the behind the scenes footage? They did so much with so little and created something that looks just as good, if not better, than most of the movies that come out 20 years later. It's just insane. Anyway, the point of the video isn't the gush about how much I love those movies, it's to talk about a very special hobbit. We're talking about the movie Frodo rather than the book Frodo, or even as opposed to a mix of both, because the books paint a rather different picture of this character. I have some ideas and some theories about why people see Frodo as an underwhelming example of heroism, and I would love it if after the video you let me know what you think as well. Again, I'm not trying to be one of those painfully obnoxious Tolkien fans who thinks if you haven't spent 50 years studying every last hair on the man's butt crack, then you don't have a right to an opinion. That's not what this is. If you think Frodo sucks, that's fine. In fact, even more than that, I get it. But bear with me. Maybe I can change your mind. There are a few reasons that Frodo fails to meet the conventional standard for what makes a fantasy hero, despite his sacrifice having the greatest impact on the story itself. First and foremost, let's talk about the Samwise Gamgee of it all. Samwise is seen by most as the titular hero of the films, and for good reason. His character arc is a much more clear and familiar one. He begins as a mild-tempered gardener who cares for little more than potatoes and Rosie Cotton's juicy dump truck.
Yeah, that brother's starving.
But eventually finds himself a living legend, friends of elves and the King of Gondor. The Hobbit, once scared to step foot outside of the Shire, ends up travelling further than any other Hobbit has before, facing down bloodthirsty warrior orcs, feared legends, and even the Nazgul. Samwise's character journey is amazing and easily one of the best parts of the movies, but sadly, its traditional story beats of heroism throw a sharp contrast to Frodo's journey, which is something entirely different, but ultimately even more transformative. I wouldn't suggest that these two travelling together was a mistake, of course not. Their extremely intense friendship, while heavily memed, is integral to the story. But I just want you to see that saying Sam was the real hero all along is a bit dismissive to the different emotional paths that these characters were taking. Frodo is not a hero in the same way that Sam is, just as Sam is not a hero in the same way that Frodo is. So I don't feel it's fair to compare their contributions. There is no doubt that the movies do frame poor Frodo in a less than favourable light. He's constantly made the one too feeble to protect himself, the one that others must risk their lives to rescue. There were instances in the book that gave Frodo a moment of traditional heroism, such as his much more flattering defeat of the Nazgul at the Ford of Bruinen, or the scouring of the Shire. But the film Frodo displays a much more passive fortitude, even before he's completely weakened by the ring. And I do think this is one of the main reasons that people underestimate him. Frodo is often put at odds not just with Samwise, but with the audience itself, which only makes it even harder to empathize with him. We know Gollum has sinister intentions. We know that Sam, who we are becoming even more invested in as time goes on, is right and simply wants to protect his friend. So when we see Frodo snap at Sam and send him away, we feel bitter, even angry at Frodo. We then miss the reason that Frodo is so determined to keep Smeagol close, why he refuses to see the truth. Frodo gave his life to destroy the ring. I know he didn't die at Mount Doom, but that's not my point. What would you say if I said that Frodo gave his life to destroy the ring the day he chose to carry it? Back in Rivendell during the council when they're arguing about who should be trusted with the fate of this powerful object, and he says, "I will take it. I will take the ring to Mordor." It could be argued that Frodo's fate was sealed the moment he picked up the ring in Bag End. Real nice job leaving it on the floor there, Gandalf. Good work. And that's a fair point. However, I would say that the moment Frodo chose to carry the ring, knowing what it could do, not just from legend but from what he had personally experienced, that was when he gave his life. I believe he knew this would be his end, and I think Gandalf knew as well. Frodo's story of heroism isn't a story of being thrust into battle and rising a stronger, braver hobbit like Sam. Rather, Frodo's arc is one of a simple Shire folk who accepted a burden like no other. He accepted an immense responsibility knowing what it meant for him when he could have simply stayed in his seat and just gone home. I think despite the word burden being used so much in the movies, it's consistently undervalued when talking about what Frodo endured. Every single step that this small, simple hobbit took across Middle-earth was a step taken under the weight of the most powerful and dangerous object in existence. An object that was constantly calling out for its true master, trying to draw Frodo to his death, corrupting his mind, his thoughts, changing him, breaking him, and turning him into the shell of what he was. We all know the iconic line from Sam,
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you! Come on!
And boy do I love that line. But Frodo was carrying something much more heavy and taxing throughout the entire series. Of course he fell, of course he was weak. He was dying from the moment he put that chain around his neck. He had to travel across immense distances, dealing with great danger, not just under the weight of the ring, but the weight of the world. He knew it was all riding on him, and no one had a problem telling him that. Frodo accepted he had to make the journey alone, even though he didn't want to. If Frodo failed, the world would fall into Sauron's grip and into shadow. All he had to keep him going was hope. And his ability to hold on to that in the situations that he was put into and the stress that he was under is nothing short of heroic. At a certain point, hope that he could save the world wasn't enough. He wanted hope that he could save himself. And that's why his faith in Smeagol was so important. That's why he had to send Sam away. If he believed Sam, if he trusted that Smeagol could only ever be Gollum, then his fate was sealed as well. That would mean that there really is no coming back from being a ring bearer. If Frodo had accepted that, then he might not have had the strength to finish his quest at all. Frodo never came back from Mordor. The ring had done way too much damage to his soul. This is the tragedy of his decision in Rivendell that day, maybe even the day that he first picked up the ring in Bag End. Thanks again for that, Gandalf. The life of a ring bearer can only be empty once the ring is gone. So the elves invite Frodo and his cousin and former ring bearer Bilbo to the Undying Lands, so that they might finally know some peace before death. Frodo might not have killed orcs, rallied the Ent, or kicked a helmet breaking his toe, but every single step that he took with the ring around his neck was a battle that he had won. Frodo is a hero. Of course he is. Not any less than Sam, not necessarily any more. He just had a very different fight. Not that anyone asked, there are my thoughts on one of my favourite fictional characters poured out into perhaps too passionate of a video. Now if anyone ever tells you that Frodo was a punk, you can just show them this video. If you like deep dives and reviews on fantasy topics and books, consider sticking around. I really would love to chat with you in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, especially for watching through the whole video. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. See you in the next one. Catch ya.